Hey everybody, welcome back to the Optometry Money Podcast, where we're helping ODs all over the country make better and better decisions around their money, their careers, and their practices. I'm your host, Evon Mendrin, certified financial planner and owner of Optometry Wealth Advisors, an independent financial planning firm just for optometrists nationwide. And on today's episode, I have a pretty awesome guest, Justin Knott, CEO of Intrepy Healthcare Marketing. And we dive into all things optometry practice and healthcare marketing. And we talk about what are the different things that every optometry practice should have in their marketing toolbox. We talk about the importance of the website and how to get the most out of your website. We talk about using social media and paid ads. We talk about where to start when putting a marketing plan or strategy together, and so much more. And this was a lot of fun for me. Hopefully you'll get something out of it in terms of helping to improve your marketing in your practice. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to Justin. We'll put all his information in the show notes, and you can check out all of the information and resources we talk about in the episode in our show notes, which you can find at the Education Hub on my website, www.optometrywealth.com. And while you're there, you can check out the other articles, resources, episode we've put together specifically for optometrists. And you can also feel free to schedule a no commitment introductory call to talk about whatever's on your mind financially and learn about how we serve optometrists nationwide. And without further ado, here is my conversation with Justin Knott. Welcome back, everybody, to the Optometry Money Podcast. I am your host, Evon Mendrin, and on today's episode, I have yet another special guest. Would love to welcome to the podcast, Justin Knott. Justin is the CEO of Intrepy Healthcare Marketing. Justin, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about some optometry marketing today.
Yeah, this is going to be fun for me too. And this is a podcast about money, but marketing ultimately will impact the revenue of any private practice, which ultimately impacts the profit, which
Absolutely.
ultimately impacts the amount that is going into the household of that owner. So it all sort of flows together here. We'll make a loose connection there, but this is something that's interesting to me, and I think any private practice owner should be interested as well, because it's about how you grow and tell the world about the story of your practice. So I have a lot of questions here about, where should optometrists think about, or how should they think about putting a marketing strategy together, and what's a part of that? So I've got a whole lot to ask you, but before we dive into all that, just talk about what's your background. Tell us about you and about your business.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started, we're almost 10 years in, but I actually started in the venture capital side of things. I've been, even at a young age, kind of a lifelong entrepreneur at heart. And my now wife and I she had the healthcare background and focus. She had been working for what became the largest ENT group in the Southeast as their head of marketing. And I was starting a lot of businesses. And so we knew we wanted to do something together. And we were fortunate enough to have a mentor that very early on in what's a fairly saturated market now was like, you need a niche. You've got a network in healthcare, you have experience in healthcare, so niche in healthcare. And that's going to be to great advantage because you can become an expert in that space. So we started the agency 10 years ago, really focusing on the referral development side of things. But my background in digital marketing, we kind of evolved over those years. And now we primarily focus on patient acquisition and patient retention, specifically for medical practices. And that's really what we've been doing for a decade now. So I like to say we're one of the more experienced experts in the space at how do you get in front of the right patient, how do you get that patient through the door, and then how do you keep them a lifelong patient.
Awesome. So you've been working together with your wife for over a decade now. There are practice owners potentially listening that are either co-owners with their spouses or have their spouses just involved in the business somehow. Any expert tips and tricks to working successfully with your spouse?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, that's a very commonplace, whether it's physician and practice admin, optometrist and practice admin in this case is a really common one that we see. I think I think probably the biggest, and it's more of probably a negative than a positive, is you just have to be realistic, I think, as a husband and wife couple, especially when you look at the day-to-day practice operations side of it, because as the practitioner, nobody else, including your spouse, can do that job. But you have a lot of people who can do a lot of different things as it goes about running the organization. And I think understanding over time and being realistic to what their strengths and weaknesses are and hiring around that. I think the thing that we've seen often more times bad than good is not being willing to address blind spots or weaknesses in the significant others that's handling the operations and the admin side of the practice. And they easily, because of a romantic relationship, build a moat around the provider, and it's to the detriment of the provider because they end up not really being able to make the best decisions because they're mixing business and pleasure. And there are always weaknesses. Like, I've got weaknesses. I'm not operationally strong, so I've got a COO that is. And I think having those conversations, the times that we've even had to part ways, a lot of times there is an issue like that. Husband and wife, the wife or the husband that's doing the practice admin stuff never allows us to have true black and white and candid conversations about what's going on in the business to grow it. And so nothing ever happens. And the same cycle repeats itself again and again. You got human capital that comes in. They don't enjoy the dynamic of working there because nobody is getting realistic feedback about how to run the organization. Yeah. And then the person moves on. Yeah. So that's, and I think hard reality, the thing that we've seen be a shortcoming, but it can be a beautiful harmony, I think, if there's just transparency and realistic expectations about where everybody's strengths lie.
Yeah, I think it gets really interesting. And this is absolutely not the topic of today's conversation.
Yeah.
Don't worry, listener. But it gets really interesting when there are, in fact, two optometrists co-owning a practice. And
sure, yeah.
Two practitioners.
And I've seen that as well.
Having to sort of sort through where is each one's strengths and interests and how to sort of divide and conquer there. So, but let's talk about marketing, because that's what we're here to talk about. What is different about healthcare marketing and optometry marketing versus every other kind of business out there?
I think what makes the space, whether you're talking specifically to optometry or just healthcare marketing in general, is really, there's two main layers. Financial, you see the regulation side of everything that they have to go through from a compliance that is very similar to healthcare, but different, because you have all this PHI protection that's there, and the fragmentation of the EHR, I think, are two very difficult things. You got to keep information you're collecting secure, but you've got CRMs, you've got PMs, you've got EHRs, you got like all of these different things that are in the works that don't love necessarily to talk to each other. So unlike an e-commerce or an e-commerce company or a real estate company or an auto dealership that can, say, bring leads into HubSpot, nurture those leads, remarket to those leads, cross-market to those leads, you don't really see that still, and we're way behind the curve, 5 to 7 years of that kind of data connection and a more traditional style funnel. I'd say that is one of the more difficult things in this space, is to connect those dots. And probably the other side is, just like with all the experience that I have, would not really feel comfortable going out and scaling a multi-million-dollar Shopify e-commerce business, because it's just a whole different animal about how you market it. The same thing can be said not only about healthcare, but all the niches that sit inside of healthcare. Marketing an optometry practice and the way that they accept patients through insurance and in-network stuff, plus the ancillary products that they're selling outside of insurance, will even look totally different than what a bariatric surgeon or an orthopedic surgeon that is maybe 100% insurance-based and referral-driven. Every one of those has its own nuances about what are the pain points for the patient, how do you upsell them, are they recurring, like do you see them every 6 months or 12 months, like an optometrist would, or is an orthopedic where it's very transactional in nature, you fix their ACL, you see them for 3 post-ops and they go on their merry way. So it's very unique it's not really a step and repeat as you get inside of each of these niches in healthcare. And I think that's fun and interesting. I also think it's where well-intended marketers can really go awry and give the other marketers that are experienced in the space a bad rap, because they get in over their head and don't understand what the differences are between saying yes to an orthopedic versus an optometry practice.
Very interesting. So let's say that an optometrist comes to you and is just wondering, where do I even start with marketing? Maybe they've, let's put a story around it. Maybe they've just purchased a practice and this is sort of their first experience owning a business or just cold starting a practice. Where should an optometrist, practice owners start with marketing? Where do they begin with starting to put together a marketing strategy and to tell the story of their practice?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, first and foremost, and this is becoming, I think, truer than ever, is your website is your digital billboard. It kind of starts and ends there foundationally, because everything else that we'll talk about on this episode are just kind of strategy development, even if it's offline and going out and building referrals with ophthalmologists and pediatricians and primary cares in your area. Those patients are going to end up vetting you on your Google My Business and on your website, and how you present that front door. It really paints a picture for everything else. And I think when you're looking at the bigger picture, I think a lot of people get tripped up, even when they're trying to bootstrap and get out of the door, on missing the importance of the initial investment into a website that can grow with you, is sustainable, and can do the things that you need to do in terms of SEO and paid advertising, conversion optimization, and all that stuff. And if you look at it in the grand scheme of things, it's the Wild West in our space. I mean, literally anybody listening here could go out and get 10 quotes for 10 websites, and they'd range from $1,000 to probably $100,000.
Yeah.
But you still need to prioritize that as a kind of a first and foremost investment, and make sure you get somebody that does have experience in doing it the right way, because it will set the tone for everything else that you do moving forward. And if you look at the shelf life of a good website is 3 to 5 years, and what it can do for your bottom line, it's actually a very nominal investment when you break it up over that 3 to 5 years. And it's really important that you start there and do it right. Otherwise, you'll be doing it again and you'll end up spending twice as much money.
So what does that mean then to not be short-sighted and to do it right? Looking at all the ways you might want to add on to it and scale it and make it appropriate for the business. Like what are some things you've seen with websites that make them maybe short-sighted and limited versus others that are really well done with a long-term thought that can scale well? What does that actually look like?
I think first and foremost, it's making the right decision from a CMS standpoint. And if you're unfamiliar with that listening, what I mean is the thing that you build your website on or in. Most people have heard about WordPress before. There's a lot of other ones like Wix, GoDaddy has its own website builder, Squarespace, all of those. Probably the biggest short-sightedness that you can make is saving a buck to hamstring yourself in the future and not building on something that's more open source like WordPress. Like GoDaddy or Squarespace, the beauty of those is for a $15 hosting fee a month, you can build a sexy looking website that's not going to allow you to scale ultimately, and it's going to give you a lot of cons over pros to save money. And what I would highly recommend is get on something foundationally that really is ultimately limitless. And why GoDaddy and Squarespace are able to keep things so cheap is everything's inside of a black box. So it's never really yours, so to speak. And any good marketer that you come to as you start hitting your growth stride and start really making revenue is going to say, there's not much we can do with this. So I recommend choosing a right CMS from a framework standpoint. Even if you can only come out of the gate with a 5 to 10 page website, you're going to be able to add on to that vehicle, so to speak, and let it take you where you need to go as you continue to make more and more money and generate more patients and generate more revenue. I think choosing the right CMS is the biggest piece of the puzzle when you're starting out.
That's interesting what you said earlier about this being like your digital store space. Like this is your storefront. This is where people will vet you first. And with optometry, like for me, for example, and maybe for you too, most, if not all, of my work is virtual, right? So it makes sense to say, okay, I definitely need to make sure my website is operating as well as it can, because that is the actual storefront. But for an optometry practice, they have a literal physical storefront. They have a place where patients will go to, but even still, the website is where people visit them first.
Yeah.
This is where they sort of, for better or worse, judge the quality of the business based on the quality of the website. Is it old? Is it outdated? Is it new? Is it relevant? Does it talk to them? So it's an interesting thought where you have businesses like optometry practices that do have literal physical storefronts, and still this digital website is what people may judge them on the most, at least that first impression.
Oh, for sure. And it's even more so when you kind of take the next step in the marketing strategy evolution, you start talking about SEO, and most people are familiar with Google My Business that has now become Google Business Profiles. It is all of that stuff still is referring back from a reference point standpoint to your website, and you can't win in local search without a strong foundation on your website. And your Google My Business or Google Business Profile will never be correlated with all the primary things you're providing, and even more importantly, all those kind of cash-based, potentially either specialties that you offer or ancillary products that can drive a lot of revenue. All of that is really based on the infrastructure and the content on your website, sending the right types of ranking signals to those other off-page things like Google My Business, that without a strong foundation, you're never going to be able to win those battles. And on top of it, really, regardless of if you're mainly insurance-based or you have people coming through the door off referrals, it's something like 80% of people, whether they find you through an insurance website as an in-network provider, or they find you through a referral, whether it's friends or family or a PCP, they're going to go online and they're going to check your website out. And that you can have a lot of referral leakage.
Yeah. And in terms of using like the content management system, someone might think of something like WordPress and think of all the hours they might dump into it to try to make it look okay, let alone like actually really good. What advice do you have to someone that's thinking about that, thinking, oh, okay, this is just way too much work. I'm instead going to use a platform like Squarespace or something like that?
Yeah, again, it's really just about planting seeds to reap them in the long run, or if you want to try to save a buck today and you're going to run into a wall in the future. It's just kind of it's prioritizing what is inevitably going to happen as you continue to grow. And I think dealing with a little bit more pain, whether it's time or it's monetary investment, is going to cause a lot less headache and frustration, and allow for a lot more scalability, and allow for you not have to revisit this whole process in 18 to 24 months. Is if you find somebody that has a portfolio of good examples. I think that's probably the biggest thing. Just like if you're looking for a branding person with logos, is you want somebody that's got experience in the space, and you want somebody that can hand you over a portfolio of websites that you would be happy at the end of the day if you had something that looked and felt similar to that, and make an investment into somebody that can do it the right way the first time, because this will be a hamster wheel that you're going to always be on, because you're always going to need a website, but you're not going to save a lot of money in the long run if you go the cheap route. And that's what I think is really important when you're looking at prioritizing your marketing budgets, especially as a new acquisition or you're starting out in a new practice. It really is a lot more important than you think.
Yeah, I guess this is just like anything else in the business. What is the best and highest use of your time? Creating the website long term, probably not in that category. So this is a prime thing to outsource to someone that can do that really well for you. And how should an optometrist best use the website, or best design the website to make it speak to their potential patients or their target patients as well as it can? Like what areas of improvement have you seen that optometrists should be doing on their websites, or whoever's doing it for them? How do they best use it if it's one of the most important parts of all of their marketing?
Yeah, I think self-scheduling has really become, I think, a standard in the industry, yet it's probably adopted 15 to 20% at most across all practices, optometry included. And I think beginning to look at how do we make our lives easier on the back end on our side, plus give the patient a self-scheduling option, is a kind of I just think it's something that you should be doing tomorrow. There's multiple different reasons. The good self-schedulers have a lot better tracking. Most workflows and practices look like this. You have a request appointment form. Somebody goes there, they fill it out. It comes to the front desk. The front desk calls them. They try to schedule them. And you're chasing people. With a self-scheduling option, there's like an 85 to 90% adoption rate, including the aging population of baby boomers. So it makes no sense just allow them to come to your website and go ahead and convert right then and there before life goes on. And I think that that's a really big, it just creates a much simpler user experience and user workflow, and creates a good marketing reporting system in the process. So you can connect the dots between who came to the website and who actually scheduled, I think is really important. And I think moving past that, and this really jumps kind of both feet into the SEO side of things, is what I always tell people is if you want to rank for it, you need a page for it. A lot of practices stop at service line or main bucket level pages on their website. But if you're going after things like dry eye treatment or myopia or vision therapy, like the kind of things that you offer and you want to rank really well and they're highly competitive in your area, if you do not have very specific, very dedicated content focused on those as primary keywords, you have no shot beating out the other optometrists in your area. And that will also show you as a good source of truth if they're finding you in the top 3 on SERPs and they're clicking through and you have really good information on that page and mixed medium content like video to support that, you're going to have a likelihood of ranking and then a much higher likelihood of a close of that patient, because they're going to know that you know what you're talking about. So I'd say those are probably the biggest things that people mess up on that are a detriment to SEO, but also just not getting with the times that patients are asking for.
Got it. So SERPs is search engine results page, right?
Exactly. Google is, if you do a Google search and whatever you see after the ads and below the map pack is the SERP results. Got
it. So if there's a specialty within your practice, if you're doing myopic control, if you're doing dry eye, vision therapy, whatever it is, you're definitely wanting to have a separate page for that, really getting those keywords throughout that page, getting that copy, all the wording dialed in there.
Yeah, exactly. And you want to focus on length and word count. And that's really the biggest thing. Like any of those that you just mentioned, those conditions or treatments, is you as a provider listening, if you went to your Chrome and you did an incognito search and you added near me to the end of that, I can almost guarantee you'll have the ads at the top, you'll have your Google My Business map pack stuff next, and then your top 3 search results more than likely are going to be local optometry groups that all have a dedicated page to that treatment. They don't just list it as a treatment offering on their treatments page. They've gone a step further and they have 300 to 500 words plus some good FAQs answering everything about that, the who, what, why, about the specifics on that treatment. And that is what a good structure on a website looks like to be able to rank really well in local search.
Interesting. In terms of SEO, does content play a role here in healthcare marketing? Different things like blogs, videos. I mean, where does that all fit in with the website and everything else they're doing?
Yeah, content is really number one in multiple different avenues of your overarching marketing strategy. Number one is the condition and treatment content that we just talked about. If you're a multi-location group that has either around a greater city or around a region, a lot of different locations, your location pages are your drivers. So you need to focus on strengthening the content on your location pages and strengthening the content on your conditions and treatments pages. Most practices, a blog is going to do very little for you in a location-based search scenario. If, again, we're talking about one of the treatments you mentioned, if somebody puts a near me, I can almost guarantee you have probably a 0.1% chance of seeing a blog post ranking. You're going to see services and treatments pages and GMBs ranking at the top of search and nothing to do with blogs. Blogs are great to drive vanity traffic to your website for like what causes X, Y, or Z, but you're going to have people from California, if you're located in Atlanta, reading about that. And it's not very helpful in terms of driving actual patients through the door. So in that aspect, content is hugely important. On the flip side, if you're talking about social media, that's really kind of the end all be all, is provider participating in content creation. So getting up your providers in front of the camera as much as possible to get them talking about the conditions, the treatments, the diagnosis, the patient protocols, all of that type of stuff is going to create a connection between your practice and the providers in it, and build a know, like, and trust relationship with that patient. And that on the other side of it is really, really beneficial in terms of actually getting an ROI in your social media, because that's probably the hardest thing that practices have. They spin their wheels. They spend a lot of time doing what they think and read is the right thing on social media, yet never bother to look inward and say, how do I get our providers participating in content creation? And getting them in front of a video is going to blow the doors off your social media.
So let's talk about that. If the website is sort of that foundation, that first, maybe most important step here, where does social media fit in? Is it something that every practice should be participating in? If so, how? How does that fit in there?
Yeah, social is definitely really critical, especially in the optometry space. I think there's a good opportunity to not only connect with existing patients and educate them and get them back through the door for their annuals and all that and stay kind of top of mind, but attract new patients in a pretty competitive marketplace. But it really, again, I think a lot of people, it's either a build it and they will come, or a post stock photos mentality. And then there's just a lot of frustration behind, why are we doing this? I think if that's how you approach it, you're probably more well suited to focus your time and attention elsewhere, because you more than likely won't see a ton of value out of it. I think if you're going to do it, then don't be a warm body in the social space, and actually have a game plan to go after a consistent content creation process that involves, again, getting your providers on camera and keeping them 1 to 2 months ahead. So you set yourself up for success, focusing on engagement, and you don't stress the provider out, where they can time block an hour one time every month, create the FAQ style videos that you need. You can break them down and you can focus on promoting them. But it is really important. I mean, there's no way around. Social is how patients connect and absorb content. Even with the up and coming Gen Z generation, they're saying TikTok is now a more used search engine than Google is for ages like 18 to 25. And that's going to continue to grow. It's pretty astounding. That's pretty much like if an 18 to 25-year-old is looking for an optometrist, they are more likely to search for an optometrist on TikTok than they are on Google, which is an astounding metric.
That's incredible. That blows my mind.
It just says, and I think I know, isn't it? It blows my mind. It's a little ridiculous to me, but there's no way around that data. And that just means is you got to be out there and you got to be creating social content. But I think the important, outside of getting the providers on camera, is don't try to be a master of all, because you never will be. Focus on one that you think is going to reach your right audience and become a master at that one. And then you can distribute your content to the other platforms.
Yeah. I think that's so, the thought of the providers, the optometrists themselves getting involved in creating content and being on camera, on video, pictures, whatever it is people start to get familiar with you, right? They start to see you as the optometrist in the videos, in whatever it is. And they get familiar with your face, the way you talk, your voice, your mannerisms. And then they go to your practice and it's sort of familiar. Like, oh, I kind of know this person already. This is a really familiar interaction. This feels good. And that's sort of the power of getting that provider out there, is that it really does build sort of familiarity with the public that you don't get from just writing, or you don't get from just having an About Us page on the website. You get that from those continued pieces of content being shared over and over again over time.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And I had another optometrist on the podcast a little while ago, Dr. Joseph Allen, and he, you mentioned people looking for optometrists on TikTok, and one of his comments, and just in conversation that actually didn't make the podcast, was that he creates a whole ton of video. I mean, he is an expert video creator, right? He creates just phenomenal video content, both for optometry and for the public. And he's got this fantastic YouTube page. And part of the reason he does that is because he sees so much bad content out there with just bad information, right? Like he feels this sort of drive to counter that with good, thoughtful videos with good information for the public. And I see this from a finance standpoint. Like I see just the awful advice and stuff on TikTok and everywhere else now. It's almost like a responsibility we all have as professionals. Like if we want the public to have good information and that's accurate and well thought out, we almost have to create content. Like we almost have to combat this. The search results are what they are, but if we just want people to be getting good information that's reasonably accurate, like we almost have to create content to combat all the just awful stuff out there. Do you feel the same way? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I do. I mean, I see it the same in my space as well. I mean, we're talking about really three different spaces: the provider that's listening, the space that you're in, the space that I am in. And I wholeheartedly agree. There's a lot of bad information out there in really every industry. And I think it is a responsibility to make sure that we're creating content that is actually going to be of value to whoever your end listener is. And in healthcare, I think that is no more true than really almost any other industry. Yeah. Financial, I'd say. And it is important. And I do think, I think the most important thing is just getting started. You're going to learn, you're going to hit some bumps and bruises along the way. I'm sure even with you doing your podcast, like I have a podcast, is until you get started and you start learning, you never learn. And so you need to just get started and you need to start creating content. There's probably going to be some imposter syndrome that you feel along the way, despite how well your side of the tracks and your medical expertise. But getting started, getting in front of a camera and starting to talk, I promise you'll get really comfortable. And when you get that first patient that comes through the door, like you're talking about, and is like, I saw your videos, I watched them before I came in, it's going to feel really good. And to your point as well, you're going to know that there is safe, reliable information that's being created out there that is really important too.
Got it. Okay. So we've got a website. We have using social media, getting the practitioners involved in the content creation. What else? What else should an optometrist think about in terms of their arsenal or like the hubs on the wheel for their marketing plan?
I think paid ads is probably the other biggest one. I think you got paid ads and then kind of marketing automation, which is really kind of leveling up and being able to retain patients and keep them kind of in the funnel. But I'd say in terms of our conversation, paid ads is probably the other big consideration. And that can be big or small. I think paid ads is an overwhelming thing in general with all the different options out there. And it's a scary endeavor because you can spend money really fast and bad money very easily. I think at a minimum, especially when you're early on, realizing what the evolution of your marketing program is going to look like. It is going to take you, there's nearly no way around. It's going to take you 6 to 12 months to gain steam in SEO. Most people practice or other business can't say they can wait around for 6 to 12 months to begin generating revenue. So things like paid ads are a very effective way to really shorten down that time window and drive patients to the door very quickly. But you have to keep your eye on the prize long term of investing in SEO because ads are just going to continue to get more expensive and you don't want to be strapped there. But probably Google ads more than anything can be really, really effective for driving a very specific type of patient through the door. And what's beautiful about search ads or Google ads more really than any other one is the purchase intent behind it. If somebody is, because it's the push-pull, pushing ads in front of somebody versus pulling them in. And search ads are pull all the way. Because if somebody's sitting down at their keyboard and they're looking for a specific treatment you provide or just an optometrist near me, you can show them ads in real time that they can convert. Versus if you're doing social ads, especially since things have changed over the last 2 years, you're pushing an advertisement for who you are and what you do in front of somebody that may not need an optometrist or may not know the service you're providing or don't know your brand. And that's going to require a lot more touch points. So I think if you're looking at ads, which you should be, I think Google ads is the best place to start, and you can start small and grow big. And then you always want to have a remarketing campaign going on. What that is pretty much most everybody listening knows exactly what I'm talking about. You like go on Home Depot, and then all of a sudden you're seeing like the ad for the drill that you're looking at on your social media. That's what I
Yeah.
mean by
Yeah.
them remarketing you on another platform or another website. And so many people don't do this, and it's the lowest hanging fruit. If you're putting in all of this time, money, and effort to drive people to your website, it is foolish of you not to use remarketing to continue to be in front of them. And it's the cheapest to advertise on and the cheapest to convert on. So I think doing two things, using Google Ads to drive people through the door, as well as SEO, and then having a good remarketing campaign that's kind of always running in the background. So when you are fortunate enough to get a potential patient through the door, that could be ultimately a patient appointment book, make sure that you're remarketing them on search ads, display ads, those different mechanisms, because they're super low cost. We're talking a few $100 a month at most to have some really effective remarketing campaigns going on.
Interesting. So paid ads are sort of that shorter term, let's drive some traffic, all this other stuff maybe takes some time.
Yeah.
Paid ads will maybe fill in the gaps in the short term, if done right, I'm assuming. And, there's a spot here where it probably just makes sense to have a specialist like yourself help with this. But on a high level, how should an OD think about using paid ads effectively? Like, are there particular do's and don'ts that you feel are really common? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I would, at your first endeavor, again, it's kind of like, I think hiring a specialist is important with this, especially with as much money as you can spend. The issue is that you'll find with Google Ads is if you try to go that route on your own, smart campaigns are very easy to run and a very easy way to spend money very quickly. When you consider that like 98% of Google's revenue is driven off of their ad platform, they are very much incentivized to make it as frictionless as possible for you to put your card in and for you to start spending money. And you have to be very careful with that. Now, there's been a huge shift in AI and things that even really good marketers can do on the platform, but I would discourage people from doing two things, from jumping in and doing smart campaigns on their own, and the other having an unrealistic expectation with an unrealistic budget. If you're going to spend $300 a month on ads, just don't do ads. And there's nothing wrong with that, but don't go in thinking that you can spend $300 to run Google Ads and have enough data to make good decisions, or have enough money out there in the auction to not run through your budget in the first 2.5 days every month. It's just not going to happen. So I think reasonable expectations is really important. And that's why I think timing of investing in ads is important, is shelve it until you can afford it without it giving you night sweats. And I think that that's really important. Invest in the other things that you can control. You can write content, you can be doing video, you can be doing a lot of other things that don't cost money if you're bootstrapping. But limping into ads with like $500 a month is going to do yourself a disservice. It'll piss you off, and you'll come out the other end thinking Google Ads don't work. And it's just not true. You just didn't have the right frame of mind when you went in.
And would you say that's the same for any other paid ad platform like Facebook ads, anything like that?
I would. I think Facebook ads, I think, is very much secondary. I think when iOS 14 came out, it flipped everything on its head, and the cold audience data is so unreliable now. We almost exclusively use social advertising for warm audience remarketing only, because to go out and find like that right subset of people that are struggling with vision problems, it's going to be really hard to rely on Facebook to present the right information at the right time to the right people. And you're not be spending a lot of money and have a lot of touch points along the way to convert them. So I think, again, if you're out there listening and you're thinking about doing ads, or you even currently are doing ads, I think down selecting and prioritizing search ads probably first and foremost. And then you can continue to get more sophisticated as you have more to invest in to those marketing efforts, and you've got better mechanisms to remarket those people. But I think starting tightly focused on search ads is going to be the best recommendation.
So you've mentioned all these different things, right? The website, we've talked about content creation, we've talked about search ads, and you've even mentioned, like with the content, like focus on one thing at a time. You can't be an expert in all of them, especially early on. How does someone just sit down and put a plan together? Like how does this all fit together? A strategy, a plan, like how do you just sit down and sort of think through or put on paper? Maybe they work with you, but even if they aren't, like where do they even start with that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think breaking down and really understanding what your patient personas are is probably the first and foremost. Most do, but don't, in terms of they've never documented, these are the patients that we want to go after. This is where they hang out. This is what they look like. This is their age ranges. This is their financial status, all those type of stuff, because really everything else kind of flows through that. Can you reach those people on advertising and where, that type of stuff. So I think really understanding who your patient is first and foremost, and then breaking down kind of your main buckets, your website, the SEO, the social media, the paid advertising, those major buckets. And then obviously the community side of things, like a physician referral development or whatever that looks like, and break those kind of buckets down, and then look at what can we do when, and what should we be doing in-house versus outsourcing. And I think if you start there, you're well on your way to having the right people in the right seats on the bus, whether it's you as the provider being willing to invest in content, or maybe even writing for a time period until you can afford to hire an agency. But I think breaking down what you can and can't do in-house, what you reasonably can allot based on kind of your value per patient and where you need to be in terms of an acquisition cost. And then that will really allow you over time to put in a good process to scale. Then you'll know, when can I hire an agency? What can I afford with that agency? And what can we be doing in-house? And what personnel should I be mindful of as we continue to hire and grow, to be able to either take more of these things in-house, or have somebody that can really manage this, because the provider won't be able to ultimately.
Yeah, I really like that framework. And ultimately, it all starts with your ideal patient, right? Who is that ideal group of people or demographic that you want to serve? And I think the whole business really sprouts out of that, right? The scope of care, scope of practice, the equipment you're going to have, the marketing you'll do, almost everything is going to start with that foundational. Who am I serving? And so I like that framework there.
Exactly. And it allows you to build as you look at investment in ancillary devices or other treatments and conditions that you can provide. How do you even cross market or upsell those up the channel? Like, you're getting patients through the door for annual eye exams and glasses, but how do you start cross marketing those people, and based on their patient personas, which are going to fit that mold best? And that's where you over time can get a lot more sophisticated, because you can build out marketing campaigns, email funnel campaigns, all different types of things. But it all starts with understanding your patient personas and where they fit into the revenue generation of your practice.
Interesting. So how do you then track what is working and what's not? What are some things you should be looking at?
That's a good question. Definitely depends. That's, again, as I mentioned, kind of at the top of the talk, it's a little bit of the Wild West in healthcare that makes it a unique situation. But I think when you come to the health of your website and the SEO in particular, I think there should be a natural correlation month over month, quarter over quarter, to increased traffic growth. But more importantly is having your Google Analytics 4, at least at a low level without getting too complicated, or your CRM set up with mechanisms to be able to track conversions sourced from that medium. So again, what does this mean? It's saying, is what we're investing in SEO working by our keywords are ranking higher, which means we're driving more traffic, but we're ultimately seeing either more appointment request forms or more self-scheduling appointments as a result, specifically from our organic search efforts and investment. Because if you don't see that, if you're just seeing an uptick of users on your website because you're writing blogs and you're bringing people in from California and you're in Atlanta, it just is not going to really impact your bottom line. I think social media, probably the biggest thing to track is going to be traffic generated back to your website, because I think that's really ultimately where the ROI comes in there. I mean, getting engagement, growing followers, all of that stuff is great, but it really should be leading toward actual traffic generation to your website. So the cause and effect can be people seeing something on social media and actually booking an appointment. And then paid ads, the good thing about paid ads is it's probably the most linear to track because most of the paid ads apparatuses have really good tracking mechanisms. So that really is, you should see what you're investing over time, over a 3-month, 6-month, 12-month mark. You really want to see the amount of leads you're generating continuing to increase for the budget you're putting in, and the amount you're paying at a per lead and per patient standpoint dropping. If you're not seeing that over time, then whoever's running it for you is not pushing on optimizing enough to get more out of the investment that you're making. So I think that's the important things for each of the major buckets we talked about today to make sure you're paying attention to. And the further back into the EHR that you can get to track everything back, the better you're going to be, because you'll know what in your marketing funnel that you invested in actually resulted in a patient, not just a patient appointment request.
Interesting. And a couple more questions for you. Where does Google My Business fit into this local search optimization, and how does an optometrist use that as best as it can be used?
It's hugely and incredibly critically important. Google has made that statement over the last several years and in moonlighting a bunch of stuff and really heavily investing into Google business profiles. I think you have to understand why that is Google is in the search experience game. Their ultimate goal over time is to have the least amount of people have to go to a website to answer questions, and Google to be able to extract that content and value out and present the answer without you having to go to a website. They can do that through Google business profiles because you as the business owner are setting up the information they need. And then why reviews are so important is they're pushing on the user to generate the content that's of value to Google. And that's them saying, as a consumer, this optometry practice did a good job, so much so that I left a review. And so that's why reviews are so important is reviews are our way of doing Google's job for them. We're creating user-generated content on those profiles to push what they deem as most important up the ladder in terms of ranking. But they can't do the job of ranking your Google business profile for all of the treatments and conditions you provide without crawling your website. And that's why it's so important you have those individual treatments broken out. Because if I do a search for like dry eye treatment or dry eye specialist, if I have an individual dry eye page on my website, more than likely you'll see in the map packs, if you did a search for it right now, you'll either have contextual bolded information that matches a review that mentions dry eyes, like I got dry eye treatment at Dr. Smith's practice and he did a phenomenal job, or it's going to say their website mentions dry eye. And that's Google My Business actually crawling your website, extracting information and correlating it to your Google business profile. So it's insanely critical to not only make sure that you have for every provider and for every location, a Google business profile, that you're investing effort in optimizing that and generating patient reviews. There's a ton of reputation management softwares that exist out there, but if you either don't have the financials or don't want to add another system into the layer, then go on a QR code generator online, literally search QR code generator, and put a link to your Google My Business page on there and print them out, put them in the clinic room and put them at checkout and start asking people to leave reviews, because most people will if they're happy. But it really is the thing that's going to drive the needle the most over the coming years in terms of all the near me search stuff that goes on that would be relevant to an optometrist.
Interesting. Okay. That's really good to know. And in terms of, okay, if they're listening and they're overwhelmed or just realizing that they want to get some help with all this, how do they evaluate like what marketing firm, creative agency, like how do they evaluate different companies in terms of what's a good fit for their practice or just what they're looking for?
It's a good question. I do think focus is really key, and expertise. Like we talked about at the top, healthcare is its own niches inside of a niche that are very complicated and nuanced. I don't think any optometrist would say it's detrimental if you had somebody that's marketed a bunch of optometry practices and know the type of patient profile, know works and has the data to back that up? Would not be more beneficial than having either kind of a niche agnostic agency that does a little bit of everything, or somebody that specializes in Amazon e-com products? I mean, I think it's an easy to understand the value creation that's there. And there's a bunch out there. I mean, it's not just promoting our agency. There's probably 5,000 to 10,000 healthcare specific agencies that exist in the United States now. So I think with the number being that big, it makes a lot of sense if you're an optometry group to vet groups that specialize or spend a lot of time in the healthcare space. It's just going to make the learning curve and the results better and a lot shorter for you. I think the other side is how do they approach, can they provide case studies? Like, I think case studies is really important as well. Is case studies and testimonials from other providers based on the experience they have in that space. And what does their process look like in terms of scaling your website traffic? Is it on-page content? Is it actual value-based backlink building, those types of things? If they're selling anything else, it's probably not going to be the results that you want. I don't think that they're, to me, the things that we do and the way that we approach it, and I think this is a good agency generalization, there's not a huge secret sauce variable between like doing SEO the right way from a good agency to good agency. So if they're selling you something different, it's probably not good. Most of the good agencies are going to sell you something similar in nature. They just may approach it slightly different.
Interesting. Well, that's really helpful. And Justin, I really appreciate your time today. I mean, this was phenomenal. I had a lot of fun. I've got a billion more questions to ask you, but out of respect of your time and the listeners, I think we'll come to a close. How can people find you and follow you and learn more about what you and your company are doing?
Absolutely. LinkedIn for sure. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. I put my money where my mouth is. I try to create video content that is at least semi-helpful. So let's connect, let's network. There's a lot of the stuff that I even talked about today, broken down in nice 90-second videos on social. And then Intrepy.com, Intrepy. That's our agency website. We've got a free practice assessment for anybody that's looking to just get a pulse on where they're at and where they should be going as compared to their competitors. But yeah, LinkedIn, I would love to connect and would love to network, and go check our website out if there's anything that we can do to help on the agency side.
Well, I will put all of that in our show notes, which anyone can find by just scrolling down in whatever app you're using. Justin, I really appreciate your time. And for the listener, I really appreciate your time as well. We will catch you on the next episode. In the meantime, take care.
Thank you very much.
Want more resources to help master your money? Check out the Education Hub on Evon's website at optometrywealth.com. Evon Mendrin is a certified financial planner and owner of Optometry Wealth Advisors, a California registered investment advisor. All opinions of Evon and his guests are their own. This show is for informational purposes only and should not be relied on for specific investment, legal, tax, or other decisions. Clients of OWA may own securities mentioned on this show.